the night Sable Vantorp turned 37. Her husband stood at the center of the Aldenmore Grand Ballroom and handed her a gift that wasn't hers to receive. She knew the moment she touched the box. The weight was wrong, the velvet too stiff. She had spent 11 years building Voss & Crane, the luxury accessories house that had dressed 4 first ladies, outfitted 3 Oscar ceremonies, and shipped to boutiques in Milan, Tokyo, and Dubai. She knew what a Voss & Crane box felt like. She had approved the embossing on every single one. This wasn't it, but she didn't say anything. Not yet. She pressed her lips into a smile she had practiced so many times it had become a kind of armor, and she held the box the way you hold something you're not sure is safe to open. Around her, 200 people lifted champagne flutes. Her mother-in-law, Cordelia Ashby, dabbed at her eyes like she was watching a wedding. Her husband's business partners clapped. Someone in the back whistled, and Trenton Ashby, 39-year-old partner at Delvane & Morrow Real Estate Development, her husband of 8 years, stood there with the particular smile of a man who thought he had done something impressive. 3 weeks earlier, Sable had found a receipt. She hadn't been looking for it. She'd been pulling a jacket from the coat closet, Trenton's grey wool blazer, the one she'd bought him for his birthday 2 years ago, and the receipt had fluttered out from the breast pocket and landed face up on the hardwood floor. Voss & Crane, private client suite, diamond Riviere necklace, platinum setting, $24,800, client T. Ashby. She had stood very still for a long moment. Then she picked up the receipt, folded it twice, and put it in her own pocket. Trenton didn't know she was Voss & Crane. He thought she consulted for a mid-size accessories distributor called Fenwick Group. That was the story she had given him when they met, and she had never corrected it, not because she was ashamed, but because she had learned early that certain men treat a woman differently once they understand the size of what she owns. She had wanted to know who Trenton was before he knew who she was. She told herself she'd been planning to tell him, eventually, but that receipt changed the nature of the question entirely. She called her head of private client services the next morning, quietly, from the parking garage beneath the Fenwick Group, where no one could hear. "The T. Ashby purchase from the 14th, she said. "Can you pull the full client profile?" A pause, then. "Of course. Give me 20 minutes." The profile that came back told her most of what she needed to know. Trenton had opened a Voss & Crane private client account 8 months ago. He had made 4 purchases. 3 of them were pieces Sable had never received. She didn't cry. She called her attorney instead. Cordelia Ashby had been talking about Voss & Crane for 3 years without knowing she was talking to its founder. She had done it at Easter dinner, explaining to the table, in the patient, instructive tone she reserved for people she considered beneath her, that real luxury wasn't about price tags. It was about provenance, and that Voss & Crane understood this better than any other house operating today. She had done it at Trenton's 40th birthday party, wearing the brand's ivory enamel cuffs and making sure everyone noticed. She had done it at Christmas, at 4th of July, at a bridal shower for a woman Sable had never met. Sable had listened to every word. She had poured Cordelia more wine. She had asked polite questions. She had never said, "I designed those cuffs. I chose that enamel. I built that company in a rented loft in Baltimore when I was 26 years old with $40,000 and a business partner who bailed after the first year." She had just smiled and listened. There were things Sable knew about herself that she had never needed anyone else to confirm. That was one of them. The Aldenmore Grand was one of the finest event venues in the city. Exposed limestone archways, amber chandeliers, a floor that had been installed in 1923 and refinished 16 times since. Sable had photographed jewelry against that floor once, 3 years ago, for a Voss & Crane campaign that ran in 4 national magazines. The venue manager, a meticulous man named Oswald, had personally supervised the lighting. Oswald was working the night of Sable's birthday party. She had seen him near the entrance when she arrived, and he had given her a look she couldn't quite read. Professional. Careful. She understood it better now, standing at the center of the room with the wrong box in her hands. Trenton was watching her with an expression she recognized, the look he got when he wanted to be thanked. He had worn it the first Christmas they spent together, when he'd given her a weekend trip he'd booked without asking whether she was free. He'd worn it when he replaced her car without consulting her because he thought her taste in vehicles was too conservative. He wore it now. "Go ahead," he said. "Open it." Sable looked at the box. Then she looked at the 200 people watching her. Then she looked at Trenton. "Before I do," she said, keeping her voice exactly the kind of calm that doesn't invite argument, "I'd like to have it appraised." The room went very quiet. Trenton laughed. It was a short laugh, the kind meant to reframe someone else's seriousness as an overreaction. "Sable, it's your birthday." "I know what day it is," she said. "This is a party, not an auction house." "I'm not saying it isn't." She kept the box closed. I'm saying I'd like it appraised. Oswald, she said, raising her voice only slightly, is Renard still the house appraiser for the venue's collection? Oswald, standing 15 feet away near the bar cart, nodded. He is. He's here tonight, actually. Would you mind asking him to come over? Another laugh from Trenton, this one higher and less convincing. This is ridiculous. It's a reasonable request, Sable said. Cordelia appeared at Trenton's shoulder, her voice a stage whisper that carried beautifully across the limestone. What is she doing? Sable didn't look at her. She waited. Renard was a small man in his 60s with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and the quiet authority of someone who has handled extraordinary things long enough not to be impressed by them. He crossed the floor without rushing, accepted the box Sable offered him, and opened it himself. He looked at the necklace for exactly 4 seconds. Then he looked at Sable. Then he looked back at the necklace. He asked, gesturing to the small loop he carried in his jacket. Please, she said. The room was absolutely still. Sable could hear the ice settling in someone's glass near the back. Renard examined the piece for nearly a full minute. Then he lowered the loop and said, with the neutral professionalism of a man who had delivered bad news inside ballrooms before, the setting is sterling silver, not platinum. The stones are high-quality cubic zirconia. The hallmarks have been altered. He paused. This is not a genuine piece. Retail value, perhaps $400. The sound that moved through the room was not quite a gasp. It was something softer and more devastating, the sound of 200 people recalibrating what they were witnessing. Cordelia said, That can't be right. Renard looked at her briefly, then back at the necklace. I'm afraid it is. Trenton's face had gone the particular grey of a man watching the story he prepared come apart in real time. There must be a mistake. I bought that from Voss & Crane. Private client suite. I have the receipt. Sable said nothing. Renard said carefully, the piece is a convincing replica, but it is not a Voss & Crane original. What Trenton did not know, and what Sable had spent the past 3 weeks quietly verifying, was where the authentic Voss & Crane Diamond Riviere had actually gone. Her attorney's investigator had been efficient. The necklace. Her necklace, the one Trenton had charged to their joint account, the one she had paid for herself without realizing it, had been gifted to a woman named Petra Hollins, whom Trenton had been seeing for the better part of a year. The replica had been sourced through a vendor in the garment district, who specialized in convincing substitutions for men who had made expensive promises in 2 directions at once. It was, her attorney had said dryly, not the first time he'd seen this particular arrangement. Sable had sat with that information for several days. She had gone to work. She had answered emails. She had reviewed the full catalog proof for Voss & Crane's couture line and approved a new hardware finish for the Aldenmore collection, named, with no particular irony, for the venue where she was now standing. She had made exactly 3 decisions. The first, she would not cancel the party. The second, she would let Trenton give her the box in front of everyone. The third, she would not pretend she didn't know what it was. I'd like to show you something, Sable said. The room was still quiet. Trenton was still standing in the particular posture of a man who hasn't decided yet whether to keep arguing or start apologizing. She reached into her clutch. A slim Voss & Crane original in brushed gold, which Cordelia had admired once without knowing it was Sable's own design, and removed a card. She handed it to Trenton. He looked at it. His expression shifted. She watched him work through what he was reading. The card was a Voss & Client and Suite member card. At the top in engraved lettering, Sable Vantorp, founder and creative director. The account you used, she said, is mine. The private client suite you visited 8 months ago, I built it. The Diamond Riviere you purchased and the 3 other pieces you bought in the past year, those purchases exist in my system. She paused. I know where they went. Trenton opened his mouth, closed it. Cordelia made a sound Sable had never heard her make before. I've been a consultant for the Fenwick Group, Sable continued, in the sense that Fenwick Group is one of 23 distributors I use. Voss & Crane is my company. I founded it 11 years ago. It generates approximately $62 million in annual revenue. I have 416 employees. You have attended 2 of our events, the Meridian Gala in 2022 and the press preview in 2023, as my spouse, without knowing what you were attending. The room was not quiet now in the way it had been before the appraisal. It was quiet in a different way, a heavier way. The kind of quiet that happens when people realize they are not watching a misunderstanding, but rather the controlled demolition of an 8-year structure. You told me, Trenton said, and his voice came out smaller than he intended, that you worked in distribution. I do. I distribute my own products. That's not the same thing. No, she agreed. It isn't. Cordelia stepped forward. She had regained some of her composure, which meant she was about to say something she would regret. This is not the time or the place. Cordelia. Sable looked at her directly for the first time that evening. You've been wearing my cuffs for 3 years. I appreciate that. There was a period, maybe 18 months into the marriage, when Sable had almost told him. They had been in the kitchen on a Sunday morning, and Trenton had been reading something on his tablet about luxury market trends, and he had looked up and said, in a musing sort of way, "You know what I've always thought? The really smart money is in building a brand, not working for one, building one." And Sable had looked at him across the kitchen island and thought, "Tell him now. Tell him this is what you've already done. This is who you already are." But she had waited a half-second too long, and Trenton had kept talking about a brand he'd read about, a competitor of hers actually, a smaller house that had just been acquired, and the moment had passed. And then it kept passing, and she kept telling herself she was waiting for the right time, or that it didn't matter, or that what they had was independent of what she had built. She understood now, standing in the ballroom, that she had been wrong about all three. What she had been doing was watching, learning who he was when he thought the stakes were lower, and what she had learned was enough. The party ended early, not dramatically. There was no scene, no shouting, no overturned champagne flute. People simply found reasons to leave. The catering staff quietly began removing plates. The jazz quartet packed their instruments with professional discretion. Trenton didn't leave with the guests. He stayed, standing near the center of the room after everyone else had gone, still holding the card she'd given him. He had the look of a man who had prepared for several possible evenings, and none of them had been this one. "You could have told me," he said. "I could have," she agreed. "Why didn't you?" She considered this. Not because she didn't know the answer, but because she wanted to give it to him accurately. "Because it wouldn't have changed what you did," she said, "and I needed to know that." He looked up at her. "What does that mean?" "It means that the receipts exist whether or not you knew who I was. The account, the purchases, where they went." She picked up her clutch from the table behind her. "It means I have everything I need." He started to speak. She let him start. "Sable, I've been under a lot of pressure. With Delvane and Morrow, with the Harwick deal." "I know about the Harwick deal," she said. "I know Delvane and Morrow has been struggling. I know you've had a difficult 18 months. She paused. "I also know that stress doesn't purchase jewelry for someone else and then wrap a counterfeit for your wife's birthday." He didn't answer. "I've already spoken with my attorney," she said. "The paperwork is in process. The joint account has been separated. You'll hear from his office on Monday." Trenton stood very still. "Just like that?" "Not just like that," she said. "It's been 3 weeks since I found the receipt in your blazer pocket. I've been thorough." She walked to the door. She had almost reached it when he said, "I didn't know about the company. I genuinely didn't know." She turned. "I know you didn't. Doesn't that matter?" She thought about Cordelia at Easter dinner, instructing the table about provenance. She thought about Trenton handing her the box with the look that wanted to be thanked. She thought about 416 people who showed up every day to work inside something she had built from $40,000 and one very determined year. "What you didn't know about me," she said, "never made what you did acceptable. That's the part I needed you to understand." She opened the door. The night air outside the Aldenmore was clear and cool, and smelled faintly of the stone and old wood that had been aging inside that building for 100 years. She stood on the front steps for a moment, just standing, not crying, not running through lists, just standing in the particular quiet of a woman who had done what she came to do. Her phone buzzed. Her head of private client services, whose name was Ondine, who had worked for her since the 2nd year and who knew almost everything. "How did it go?" Sable typed back. "It went exactly the way it was supposed to." She put the phone in her clutch, her own design, brushed gold from the fall collection, and walked to her car. She had an 8 o'clock meeting on Monday. The fall catalogue needed one more proof. The Aldenmore collection was going into production in 6 weeks, and she still hadn't approved the final chain weight. There was a great deal of work ahead. There always was, and for the first time in a very long time, none of it had to be carried by someone pretending to be smaller than she was.